those Forbes lists are funny. I did 2006s for Forbes, and Zach O'Malley Greenberg, who's been the editor, I think, just about ever since. And other people had done them before me, but it's a wild process because you kind of, some artists will basically, they won't turn over their tax records like Ye did, but they'll say yes, no, higher or lower as you're showing them numbers. Like you play like a negotiation ping pong. And it was funny, the year that I did it, some artists wanted nothing to do with it. Like there were artists that were qualified that would tell me, no, the number, so that basically they don't appear in the list. They don't want to be audited. I think that now it's a much different game. And we see like the constant competition between like Puffy and Dre and Jay, and for a while 50, you see it in there, where those guys are always going to be in it. But yeah, Kanye wanted back in that conversation.
It's also interesting to me, though, that he's just yet another example of a hip hop artist who has only become insanely wealthy
And
through
something else.
branching out, doing something else, right? The music is always a proxy, whether it be Dre and headphones, Puff and Ciroc, Jay and the Live Nation stuff, and Rock Nation management and all that other stuff.
Yeah, Latifah, Will Smith, on and on.
They all parlay it. It's a shame that like the thing that makes them the most relevant can't be the thing that they make the most money.
Right.
I think hip hop will always be a voice for the people.
Hey, what's going on, man?
What's happening, man?
Doing well. I like the beard.
Yeah, thank you. You just say it now, you mean it.
I mean it this time.
Thanks. It goes well with the Masterpiece Theater, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, man.
Next time I'll have a pipe, a smoking jacket, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. There you go. Can you get something in the fireplace?
Yeah, it's gonna be burning, man.
There you go.
How you doing?
Man, I'm doing well. We haven't spoken in a few days. It's good to see your face. How are you?
So long as we've gone without talking to each other?
Over the course of this podcast, for sure. And with that said, maybe life.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah,
you miss me.
I do.
Yeah, man. Lots to talk about. First of all, that Havoc interview was dope, man. I'm so glad we got that.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to more stuff coming up. I know we got a couple things going on in the next few weeks, which will leave for a surprise, but I'm really looking forward to that.
Definitely, me too.
Been a big couple of weeks. First of all, I think we'd be remiss not to start with Fred The Godson.
Yeah.
Hip hop's first loss to COVID-19. Pretty crazy. What were your thoughts, about it and Fred in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's just sad, you and I were together one time, and talked to Fred briefly. But much more importantly than that, he's one of these artists that I really feel got better over time. And, I really thought that he was getting to a place where he'd have a very noteworthy album under his belt. Some could say he already has. But to watch, Corona intersect with hip hop on this level is something none of us wanted to see, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the last couple of weeks have been really, you had the Michael Rappaport rant on IG where he was going at hip hop for not acknowledging it. But I'm not sure what he's really talking about because there are a lot of people that it's affected and they've been very open with it,
Not acknowledging, you mean not acknowledging Corona?
Yeah. He had an IG rant where he's talking about hip hop not like stepping up and like taking it seriously and really kind of getting the message out. He was talking particularly kind of about alluding to the current generation, but I mean, I think that it's touched hip hop like it's touched everyone. Fred being the most serious. You talked about that time that we met him with Apollo Brown and Joel Ortiz. I actually met him maybe like 2011, 2012, something like that. It's right after he was on freshman cover, because his year was like like Kendrick and Crit.
Yeah.
And I can't remember who else, but like it was like a really high-powered freshman year. And you know, he was in the conversation with all those guys, you know, and I think that he was really underrated. You know, he had a
Mhm.
real laid back style, as you know. Um, but his punchlines, you know,
Yeah.
you'd have to go back and rewind multiple times just to catch the double entendres, you know.
He
But
really, yeah.
I
No, go
put him
ahead.
in the back room in BET on 106 in Park when I was there. You know,
Wow.
I had him in there. He did the Cipher one year, and you know, one of my favorite freestyles is the one he did with Funk Flex about 2 years ago.
Hmm.
To the best of both worlds with R. Kelly, and you and I had a little back and forth about that freestyle back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you and I were at a place with Ambrosia where it was, you know, that Fred is part of a class of artists. You know, I think like Papoose is one of them. You know, a guy like Ransom, um, you know, Saigon. They're like these products of New York mixtape culture, like the actual physical mixtapes that really made a name for themselves and built careers. And I think that in a lot of ways, Fred is kind of the youngest in that class. And you know, in recent years, it was kind of hard for us to have a place to cover his music on the site. And I know we had some discussions internally of like, will our readers like this, all of that. And then he came with, I guess it was 2018, this freestyle on Flex, which is, you know, a launch point earlier in his career too, in the early, you know, 2010s, and he just demolished it. And you in particular really saw the light in that at a time when, sad to say, you know, Fred wasn't necessarily part of our content strategy. He later came back and we covered him a lot in recent years. But yeah, what do you remember that
Yeah, I
freestyle?
mean, why do you think that, man? Like, our site was, I think, one of the most pure sites in terms of recognition of artists with lyricism, with substance,
Yeah.
you know, not predicated on radio hits and commercial success, but really on artistry. Um, why do you think we got kind of put into that box where we really had to kind of lock down and really focus more on artists we thought might bring more high wattage?
Well, that's a really good question. And I think the standard has changed a lot too. And that's not to say that an artist like Fred doesn't meet that standard, but I think that people crave songs. And there's like a few different lanes for what people want. A fully made song isn't something that I had heard a lot of from Fred in recent years. And that is no way to discredit him. That all changed. Like he had, no, I'll come back to that. But yeah, I mean, those artists didn't always make the most complete songs, but when they went and did freestyles, when they did ciphers, when they did, you know, 1 minute, you know, covers, that's where they could take it to another level. Do you see it differently?
Well, yeah, yeah, I do. I guess what I'm really trying to get at is, you know, this touches on another artist who has been really affected by COVID, which
Yeah.
is Westside Gun.
Hmm.
You know, he just dropped an album Friday, right? Was it Friday, this
Two
past
Fridays
Friday, or
ago.
2 Fridays ago, which is just phenomenal. I love this album. But he was very quiet about his experience until recently. He just did an interview where he opened up about it with Peter Rosenberg and just talked about in great detail how much it affected him and like how he had thought he was okay and then he had a relapse and was in the hospital and like thought he was going to die, you know, like
Yeah.
really that serious. But you know, in the course of the interview, and you and I have spoken with him and with Benny and that whole Griselda crew
Hmm.
on a few occasions. It's interesting to me that they fit the exact same criteria you just described, right? Like underground,
Yeah.
not necessarily like hooks and not making radio music, very dense lyricism, hardcore, hard scrabble, but they have managed to go to a whole different level than almost anyone in their peer group right now. Why do you think that is? Why do you
So
think
that's
some
that's a
pops
good
for and others it
parallel.
doesn't?
I think that at some point there becomes a narrative built around any artist. And now with social media, they can control their own narrative and really broadcast themselves. But I think that like Fred, you know, I personally, not being in the 2000s, early 2000s New York culture, I didn't know a lot about him besides what we had both said, like one of the best at punchlines, you know, impeccable timing, always found the pocket, really took his independent hype to high heights with the double XL cover. but you didn't know a lot else about him. And Griselda, here we are, 3 years after, 3 years to the month, I believe, after they announced their signing with Shady, and have made documentary videos, have gotten a lot of coverage. And at that point, you start to get invested. You know, you can make the same argument right now for somebody like Reason with TDE. Like, watch what happens this year when people start to learn who he is as a person. That persona and coverage will take flight, and the recognition comes after.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I do think that, and you know, not to say that Fred didn't do this, but I think that in general, artists who really pour their life into it, like open up and let you see who they are as people,
Yeah,
are the ones who thrive. You know, that's the commonality between like a Kendrick, a Cole, a Drake,
yeah,
Griselda. You know, all these cats really, you know, are incredibly transparent. That's why we loved Boogie, you and I.
yeah,
You know, even like an Eminem. Like, I mean, like, for all the gimmickry and everything that he had, and like the dense lyricism, I think it was the songs like that where he would like drop hints about like what's going on in his life with his daughter and, you know, his baby
yeah.
mom and all that stuff that really kind of separated him from most other people.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, like Joe Budden, you knew the names of his exes long before, you
Love
know,
and
there was
hip hop.
ever love and hip hop.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, man. So yeah, rest in peace to Fred. Gunn, it sounds like, was really, you know, really up against it, and Scarface. Scarface, man,
Yeah,
we knew that he was suffering from it, but recently it just came out that he had kidney failure. As you know, both his kidneys have failed at this point. He's doing dialysis 4 times a week. You know, it sounded like he said that he beat the odds. The doctors can't even understand
yeah.
how he made it. So it's crazy, man. It's really insane.
Yeah, because I think he's had, you know, hospitalizations before that have kind of made the media. The Joe Budden podcast pointed out that Fred had a history of, you know, medical bouts and things like that. And from what we know of this, yeah, and to see the update on Scarface 2 weeks later and know that right now, this moment, it's very serious, is just very alarming, especially after what happened last Thursday.
Yeah, yeah. But rest in peace to Fred the Godson. You know, thoughts and condolences and prayers to his family and friends and fans. You know, and you know, hope everyone else stays healthy out there and stays vigilant. You know.
Yeah, and I'm keeping my eye on Scarface, Slim Thug, Jazzy Jeff also announced that he had recovered.
Yeah.
And Rodney C from the Funky Four plus one more. Like, at all different corners of hip hop, this is hitting right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are still things that are coming that are positives, people making positives of the situation. You know, these beat battles
Yeah,
just continue to get better and better. You know, Teddy Riley versus Babyface, like that's my era. You know, I would love to see Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis versus Babyface in LA. You know, I think that would just be like the king of all battles from that era.
yeah.
But this Teddy Riley and Babyface joint, man, like it was. First of all, they had some missteps, and people were
Pump
clowning them.
fake.
People were clowning them the first
Yeah,
night. Mostly Teddy for like doing too much. He had background dancers and his hype man, and like, you know, keyboards and everything. And then the sound wasn't right. But when they got it together 2 days later, they had, at I think the height was like 415,000 real-time users. I saw a stat. They did 4 million uniques or users over the course of like an hour and a half or 2 hours.
oh wow.
Insane. Did you
Yeah,
catch any of it? Like,
yeah, I did. And you know, I didn't watch it, but I've heard a number of people say that through Teddy's website, the sound was perfect on Saturday night.
Yeah.
And I give, you know, TR a world of credit for trying to take some of that traffic. You know, I see that like Questlove goes on every different platform, but yeah, to run your own website and try, and apparently have that good sound, that's cool. But for IG, which is where everyone else was, I turned that one off after about 15 minutes of struggle.
Yeah. What
The
now?
second one.
The second one
Yeah.
was right. It was right. Even though you know, it still ended kind of crazy, but
Yeah.
it was still right. So you were like, I don't know, how old were you, like 10 or so in the 80s?
I'm born in early '84, so
Oh, damn. So I mean, like you were
yeah.
like Do you remember real time any of their songs back at like Bobby Brown, like "Don't Be Cruel" and "My Prerogative"?
Yeah, that's about my earliest memory of radio was like late 87, 88. And I definitely like that Bobby Brown album from 88 is one that really like is a lifelong resonation for me. How far back Babyface goes with me, that's, I know like Babyface's like solo stuff from the early 90s and obviously, you know, Tony Braxton, Janet, you know, that stuff.
Well, he was on that Bobby Brown album too. You know, he
Yeah.
did "Don't Be Cruel" and,
Right.
and "Every Little Step" and Ronnie and
Yeah.
Teddy did "My Prerogative." You know, so why do you think this spoke to so many people?
First of all, it's just fun music to listen to. I mean, it's kind of like the D Nice house party, but and then there's a competitive level to it. And what I don't know, but you do, because I don't have the context, is that there is a very competitive rivalry there. And that from what I understand, this might be a tighter matchup than any that we've seen in these Instagram battles. I don't know.
Well, I think Face got him pretty good. But yeah, I mean, they both got like crazy hits. You know, for me, I think in some ways it's like a new Motown.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it's definitely the music of my high school. I remember my first year in college, I went to the Boston Garden and I saw New Edition and Bobby Brown performing, headlining. And
Wow.
the controversy is that the tour started with New Edition headlining. And by the time it ended, Bobby was headlining because his album was just so red hot. But to see those dudes in Boston where they grew up in the Garden was
Mm-hmm.
crazy. But you know, Babyface and LA and Babyface and Teddy ran the charts at that point. You know, it's almost like what the Neptunes were doing in the 2000s. You know, and Jam and Lewis. So I think that there's my generation. There's our kids who had to suffer through hearing the stuff in the car when we're driving and stuff like that. You know, when they don't have their iPads on.
Yeah.
And then you guys are kind of the bridge generation. I guess your mom was young enough to still be listening to it,
Yeah.
even when you were growing up. So yeah, man, it's multi-generational. But I was shocked to see that many people tuned in.
I saw more people on my timeline, which isn't an industry timeline on socials. More people were talking about that, which is my generation largely, than they were Primo versus RZA.
Yeah, dude, it was like a Super Bowl. Like, I
It
mean,
was a family event.
For context, it was getting 4 million is the kind of numbers that like award shows get at this point.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's just unreal.
And you would have thought that interest would have waned after what happened Saturday night. And I know it definitely benefited a bit from those jokes and punchlines. But honestly, I didn't know that the battle was rescheduled till Monday night until it happened. And then I'm, seeing it and then I tuned in,
Yeah, yeah.
So that was nuts. So let me ask you one question, and this applies to all the battles that we've seen. Obviously, working the crowd like a DJ and when you drop your records is fine, but take apart the music and the song itself and the song selection. How much do you think attitude and finesse can sell you on the winner of each round?
Well, that's a good question, man. That's a really good question. Well, first of all, I think that a lot of it is programming because it was much closer on Monday to me than it was on Saturday. On Saturday, Babyface was just destroying them because like he like came in with a game plan and like he didn't try and like go too hard. He just came in with the deal, like just like he was hitting me with just like classics, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he was smooth, and he did have on the Masterpiece Theater smoker jacket. Like if you really want to come with it, like he was like, but he was also laid back and being complimentary, but talking greasy at the same time. It was really. He was a master at it. Like his showmanship was like impeccable, and he kept that up on Monday too. So I do think that had a part of it.
Right.
But I think that the sequencing is probably the most important thing. I also think it's really important, and this is what it was actually good that they flipped it. Like who goes second?
Right.
I think who goes second like has a distinct advantage, So
yeah, for sure. Because the person to go first is going to set the tone for the night, especially if you're thinking of what your best records are and you're reshuffling everything.
Yeah. So now there's rumors that the next one that Swizz and Tim are trying to get is Dre versus Puff.
I saw that. Yeah, and what Teddy and Dre were communicating during one of the battles too, right?
Oh, were they? I didn't know.
I,
I didn't know
I, I
that.
believe I believe so. And Dre, said that like, I don't know, man, we'll see.
Ooh. Okay. So then, what's your take on that? Like, who gets that? And first of all, well, wait. First, let
Yeah.
me ask this. Like, okay, we both know that Puff for sure didn't produce everything, right? He was more like kind of like the conductor of
Hmm.
his, stable of producers to hit. There's a lot of chatter over the years that Dre didn't produce everything that he claims. Warren G, Scott Storch, Mailman, like
Daz. Yeah.
Daz, a lot of people, like in that gumbo. But putting that aside, if they both play records that they were associated with, right?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't matter who's credit, but that they were kind of behind. Who gets that?
I think Dre gets it. I think certainly a case could be made for Puff, but I think that Dre, just because he has, you know, almost 40 years, he has all of these different movements. I think he takes it, and it's going to be a wider catalog. It's going to be more interesting. Dre has R&B records that'll, but at the same time too, Puff has at least 4 or 5 records that are just unbeatable. That he's going to take some rounds too. I think regardless, All About the Benjamins, which was him and D Dot. Think about that. That's nuts. Or even Juicy.
So I love Dr. Dre. He's my favorite hip hop producer of all time.
Okay.
For sure. I've said that, a number of times now.
Yeah.
But I think Puff takes this. Puff has, let me put it to you this way. You are much more likely to hear a medley of Bad Boy songs at a wedding, at a barbecue, at a graduation party.
Yeah.
Like he is truly the Motown of that 90s era. So if LA and Face are that of like the 80s, Puff is that of the 90s. Very slick. Like the Dre stuff is like sonically incredible, but also very, very rugged. And not necessarily made for mixed company, even though you can play G thing and stuff like that. But you know what I mean? Like the Bad Boys, like the May stuff and More Money, More Problems, and
you're more likely to play that than Obi Trice, or
yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, like I said, and again, I'm just putting myself in that seat. And Dre has created these grooves that are iconic. And yes, they're sampled, but they're sampled in a different way than kind of what Puff was doing with those, kind of tweaking up records. I don't know. I still got to go Dre on that. And maybe it's because, like you, Dre was one of my hip hop heroes and still is. Not to say Puff isn't, but I don't know. But it's an interesting matchup for the reasons you said, that there's a lot of other people that should be in that room if the battle happens on both sides.
Yeah, and it's a lot like, the parallels are a lot like Face and Teddy Riley, in that there is Sheen versus like kind of like the more rugged.
Yeah.
Teddy was that rugged, like kind of more street sound.
Did you expect Teddy to win?
Polished. No, I expected Babyface to win.
As close as it was, and I think you said that you also thought it was close.
Yeah, the second one was closer, but it wasn't a question for me.
Interesting.
If it was boxing, I think it would have been a unanimous decision, but like every card would have been fairly close.
Yeah.
So the other one that people are talking about, and I don't think Swiss, and this just came up on social media.
Yeah.
Is Erykah Badu versus Lauryn Hill.
Yeah.
Now, who you think gets that one?
Because it's not. I mean, are they DJing or are they performing?
They're playing their songs.
Oh, like a playlist battle.
Yeah.
Okay, like we've seen. Ooh.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, if they're performing, like Erykah, hands down right now, and that's not to throw shade at Lauryn. I've seen Lauryn perform in the last 10 years. Playlist. I think Erykah said it herself. She thought Lauryn would have her. I tend to go that.
Man, Erykah's being modest and deferring to one of her, Erykah would destroy Lauryn Hill. And you know how I feel about Lauryn. Like, I love Lauryn. I'm no shade to AZ, but like I was mad when Lauryn lost in our GOAT battle in round one. Like I didn't know how that was possible. I think she is one of, if not the most gifted woman MC ever, you know. But yo, man, her catalog is not nearly big enough. She's got basically 2 albums, and one is a group album, you know.
2 albums, but then you can come in with remixes and features that include her. And I know her hip hop collaborations are like 5, you know, outside of the food.
I mean, Love Jones, but what I mean, there's not really that much. Like she's got maybe let's call it 15 songs total. Erykah has, you know, what, 6, 7 albums of material.
But maybe all you need is that 15. I mean, really, if you're underestimating it, and Lauryn has. And are you going, my opinion? I mean, are we doing like the Dre and Puff rules, or what history says? You know,
I'm doing what the people say. I think the people are gonna say on and like Love of My Life and Back in the Day, and you know all the stuff Clever, and I mean like Orange Moon. Like I mean, just like there are just so many joints that Erykah has. Window Seat. I mean, she can just go in for albums and albums. The Healer. I mean, she got joints, man. She's got.
But she doesn't have the benefit of, I mean, and I know you say the people, but I'm imagining again, you know, Lauryn has always leaned much more, has always gotten some of the mainstream flowers that Erykah hasn't since the very beginning of her career.
I think it's catalog. I really do. Like, so, like, listen, if they had the same number of albums, I think it would be incredibly close. But it's like Jay versus Big.
Yeah.
I know people are gonna get mad and everything, but like Biggie does not have remotely the catalog that Jay-Z does. Just he had a limited catalog. It just is what it is. But you take Jay's hits.
Yeah. But if the battle's kept at 15 or 20 songs, I hear you. RZA doesn't have the production catalog as Primo, and if you looked in the comments of our last, conversation, there's a lot of people that really disagree with you and I. You know?
Yeah, a lot of Wu people. I know. We built a big Wu base. I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad at all. But I'm just saying, like, Primo got the bigger catalog, you know.
I listen to more Erykah Badu music than Lauryn Hill at this point in my life. I mean, just more often, and I still think Lauryn has that one.
Yeah, well, I hope that one comes to fruition.
Yeah.
We can debate that after it happens. Speaking of debate, like I want to jump to this, man. So we started to get into this in the document, and I could tell it was going to get testy. and I would much prefer to do this in front of people. Like,
oh wow! All right. Yeah.
So, well, you set up the story.
Okay, so Reggie and I share a document, and we have for years. Amanda Mester was a huge part of that document too. It's just kind of, it applied to what was going on in the culture and how AFH as a voice was going to, attack it, so to speak, how we were going to cover. So that document lives on to this day as it applies to music and this podcast and whatever else. So this week, Vlad TV ran an interview with Mac 10, and Mac 10 broke down why Westside Connection is no more. And I thought this was an important story. So Mac essentially says he got into an argument with Ice Cube's brother-in-law. So Ice Cube's wife's brother, they get into a physical altercation. And from that moment on, Ice Cube, Mac 10, and Dub C are no more. So this is like somewhere in the mid-2000s. First of all, I'm a fan of these 3 artists and a fan of the group. I thought this matters. Like, this is like why Pete Rock and CL Smooth don't speak. Like, I genuinely care. And Reggie was like, you were real terse about it too. What did you write? Not interested?
This is not interesting to me. Straight up.
So at that point later in this day, Ice Cube, who is not one of these artists that's all day long on Twitter, tweets back somebody that sends him the video and says, never happened, fake news or something. I said, this is interesting to me because Ice Cube and Mac 10 never address each other. Like, for years, Mac was like, yo, it's fine. We just the group doesn't exist anymore. I want to know the real reasons, especially if this isn't the one. And then I said, if this develops, this is much more important than Slaughterhouse, which I feel like AFH covered we exhausted the coverage of the fallout of Slaughterhouse, and we had known all along what had caused it to begin with. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's a great setup. I'll tell you why I was opposed to it, and this will give people insight into kind of how our debates happen in the document and decision making around why we did things. I think you and I would agree, just on a high level, that we did not engage in gossip. Like, gossip was not the thing that we were seeking to do. Like, who's cheating on who, like who's like, with who's with a girl, stuff like that. That's not what we were doing.
Right.
We would, however, report on events that occurred that were personal, that affected something, or that were like.
So we didn't cover the lyric of Becky with the good hair, but we did cover the elevator.
Exactly. That was actually an event, and it shook things up. And we would cover beefs and stuff like that, but it wasn't about like this. Kind of fell into gossip for me because it wasn't about Cube. It was about his brother-in-law, and it was just coming from Mac 10. It wasn't something they were debating, and it felt like more gossip to me and it's also 20 something years ago, right? Like, now if it had been, it would have been different for me if he had said that he and Cube got into it one day in the studio and they just didn't tell anyone, right? Like, then it would have felt different to me, and maybe that's arbitrary. But the bigger thing for me, though, was, and this is where you and I started to really diverge, and I thought it could get contentious, was that I never saw the breakup of Westside Connection was not a big deal to me because they were never meant to be a group that stayed together. They were three individuals who came together for a project or two, but their main function and main expression as artists was not going to be through Westside Connection. They were just a super group, and these were a couple one-offs, and so it was cool to get them. But the idea of them breaking up was kind of a fiction. Whereas Slaughterhouse, you then threw in Slaughterhouse, but to me, Slaughterhouse was different because at the time that Slaughterhouse came together, all four of those guys' careers were starting to stall a little bit. And they came together and they formed a group that had such success that I believe that it became bigger than each one of them were solo at the time. And I believe that they were being positioned as staying together as a group, kind of indefinitely. You saw that with the Shady 2.0 stuff.
Yeah.
You saw them releasing multiple mixtapes together and albums. And so the notion of them coming together with the intention of being a group, not just like a one-off type thing, and then breaking up, I thought was a bigger deal.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I mean, I look at Westside Connection differently. I think that they were supposed to be like the Ghetto Boys. That first album went platinum. I think it may have debuted at #1. I mean, it was very high on the charts. It wasn't just a gangster rap sleeper. And yeah, I mean, I think Westside Connection is, as much as I love songs by Dub C, I think that album was bigger than anything that he had done over the, almost previous decade with Low Profile and the Mad Circle. I love Mac 10's first album, but I still think Westside Connection as a group was a far bigger look for him because he was an incubated artist in Ice Cube system. I think that group matters. And I think that, Tupac allegedly, beats down an engineer and Dr. Dre leaves death row. There's a lot of people that say those incidents are related. I care about if there was an altercation, even if it was peripheral people, if it affected the fact that to this day, Dub C is Ice Cube's hype man and they tour together and Mac 10 is out here in the woods. Like, that to me is interesting. And I've always wanted to know why, especially if it was something, really serious,
If it was like EPMD or Tribe or, Mobb Deep or any group that was like that was designated to be a group and that's what broke them up, I would agree with you. I'd be in. But, again, for me, it's like, it's like Mos Def and Talib Kweli, right? Like, they were never meant to be a group. They came together, they did a project, and that was it.
But for 20 years, people wondered why they wouldn't do another one.
Right, do another one, but they also didn't question the fact that they were they were primarily solo artists. But
Right.
I'll use another example because, which is Red and Meth, right? People see them as a collective, but by no means do people see them as just being a group. They both have very established solo careers and are known for being individuals as much, if not more so, than a collective.
Let me put it to you this way: Def Squad. If Def Squad, if Red and Eric Sermon, after a few years of Def Squad, go off and they're still performing together, but they never work with Keith Murray again. Don't you want to know why? Doesn't that question linger?
Yeah, but they like they were a crew. They actually like splintered off and formed a collective that was meant to be together, just like Native Tongues. People wonder why Native Tongues weren't together.
I think that's no different than Westside Connection, though. I mean, those guys were on Mac's first album, Cube and Mac, you know, looked out for each other in all these different ways in the mid-90s. To me, that was a crew. And this is the other point that
Cube signed Mac, right?
I think so. I mean, it was through Priority, but I think
Yeah.
that he was kind of the stakeholder.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's interesting to me why Cube and Mac 10 would not have, like, why they would have a falling out. Because
Right.
they were, you know, homies and, like, you know, business partners and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the added ingredient of Westside Connection breaking up is not, because they were never meant to be together forever. That's all.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll say, and I do disagree with you on that. I think that, you know, there was a second album and they were appearing together in movies and always sitting together at award shows, touring. But I just don't feel like that era of West Coast gangster rap especially has any place to live online. And I know when at AFH and previously when I was at Hip Hop DX and All Hip Hop, there's people out there that really feel strongly about it and have nowhere to go. And that's why it was always important to me at AFH, if the music was great, you know, and MC8 and Alchemist working together, that's huge news. You know, we covered Mac 10 a lot, and those stories did really well. People are hungry for it. They care. And sometimes with even more contemporary stuff like Slaughterhouse, I didn't always see the interest there, especially after But So Long.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, we covered it now, you know, so you got your wish. But like, do you think the story is true? Like you said, Cube said fake news. So now what do you believe?
I want to hear more. You know, I want to hear what it was, and then leave it alone. I mean, obviously, all three guys have better things to talk about, but I've always wanted to know what was the moment that these two guys that were always inseparable for like at least 5 years, what went wrong? So I don't know. I was always thinking it must have been something at home, you know, like real, like, I don't know, you know, but, or money.
It's usually money. I mean, when it all comes down to it, you know. Yeah, before we move on to another thing, I want to go back to the COVID culture, because another thing that came out is the Travis Scott Fortnite concert. He did a 10-minute virtual concert in Fortnite.
Yeah.
They had a gigantic Travis Scott, like jumping around the universe and everything, and 10 million simultaneous users tuned in. So that means that probably over the course of that 10 minutes, there were, I don't know, 15, 20 million viewers at some point.
Yeah.
And when you combine that with like YouTube views and like and people looking at replays on Fortnite itself, probably 25, 30 million people saw it. Now, for context, dude, that's like the Grammys. That's bigger than the Oscars. That's like bigger than like Game of Thrones, the series finale.
Yeah.
Like, it's absurd how many people that is. So, Did you see it?
I didn't. I've never played Fortnite, but I knew that it was happening, and I was like, "This is insane." You know, did you tune in live?
Yeah. I didn't watch the live, but you can watch it on YouTube now.
Mm-hmm.
There's a YouTube 10-minute video. It's incredible, and it's really well done. But what do you think it is that drew people in to see Travis Scott? Do you think he's that big, that transcendent as a superstar?
I think that it if I understand it correctly too, there's a level of, let me see if my gaming system can do this too, right? Like, so A, it's one of the top artists in the world, and B, it's this new thing that combines two interests. So it's almost like it becomes a if you weren't there, where were you, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's that the virtual aspect. You know,
Yeah.
people want to be included, and but it was bigger than like Star Wars. There was a Star Wars thing they did recently. It was bigger
Oh,
than
really?
that. Like, yeah, I mean, like it was transcendent. You know.
Travis is probably the closest thing to Drake in the last year in terms of hip hop superstar at that level, right? Like in terms of that reach. And I don't. He keeps a low profile about it and just keeps doing cool things like this.
Yeah.
He put out a new song with Kid Cudi too, the Scots, on Friday. Did you hear that?
I have not. Is it good?
It's cool. I tend to believe that the Travis Scott I like most is just his own vision, and he's got a few of these side projects. And I like when he collaborates on his albums, but that to me is still like what I look most forward to. But it was cool. I've listened. I think I listened twice, and I'll check it out more through the week.
Okay, and one last thing on the beat battles. So French Montana made a statement saying that he could, go song for song with Kendrick Lamar in a beat battle. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, that I don't see that as possible at all. Like, but again, if you were to ask a 25-year-old that lives in Queens, they might disagree, with me. But for me, I actually don't think I could name more than 5 French Montana songs, and that's not to diss. That's just not been an artist that I've sought out. And Kendrick Lamar to me is probably the artist whose lyrics I've memorized the most over the last decade.
So I'm gonna go left on you.
Oh, wow.
Well, I'm actually not like so. This is where I think that it's really important to set up the criteria ahead of time, right? If the criteria is bangers, like who's gonna turn out the club?
Yeah.
French got joints, man. French has big, big, big records, and part of the reason why you might not know, but like Unforgettable and stuff like that, is because you don't even necessarily associate it with French Montana, but if you hear it, you know that it's a gigantic song.
But they're never solo records, right?
Right, exactly. They're often collaborations. He joins in with people.
Right.
Pop that and stuff like that. He got big records. Kendrick is not that dude. He got a couple of club bangers, but like he's not a club dude. Like he's a more of a headphones, like sit down and listen and meditate to it. And yes, in terms of artistry and substance and lyrical ability and stuff like that, Kendrick is like almost peerless. But so that's why you got to really establish the criteria.
Well, and it's all who shows up too, right? Like, and we struggle with this when we were doing GOAT. Like, we didn't broadcast those competitions to artists because if one artist shares something and the other artist doesn't, it skews the vote. If both of those artists push it to their social following, again, I think Kendrick wins, just because Kendrick has a much further reach as a brand and does things so scarcely on the internet. Like if he wanted you to be there, it changes everything. Like, but I just put myself in those seats. Kendrick, it sounds to me like you're putting yourself maybe a little bit more in what you anticipate the room to be.
Yeah, because I actually saw it firsthand. I was at Power 105, their big annual concert at Barclays a few years ago. This is like right around when To Pimp a Butterfly dropped. And they had Fetty Wap. It was a bunch of dudes who had a bunch of radio hits at that point. And Kendrick.
Yeah.
And I just watching the crowd just wasn't reacting to Kendrick in the same way because it was a very distinct kind of hit-driven crowd. Power 105, and Kendrick wasn't getting that much run on Power 105 at the time. He's a huge artist, but not getting a lot of radio play. So I think it really depends on like who the audience is, and what
it's tricky.
Criteria are.
Yeah, and I mean, Kendrick's got a few hit features on other people's records, but again, do you look at it as just French's part. Because if it's that, somebody said that, when Scott Storch put Still Dre in the Manny Fresh battle, take away everything that he didn't do on the song. It changes things. And for French, these are two rappers going at it. Is he only entitled to his own part of the record? Because that, again, you might I'm going with Kendrick.
Yeah, Kendrick will want to play Problems, and there's some joints he'd want to pull out too. Like he want to play Control,
Definitely Problems, yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of Kendrick, this week TDE did TDE Appreciation Week. Dropped new records from Absol, Isaiah Rashad, Sir, and Reason.
Mm-hmm.
What were your thoughts on that? First of all, just even on the move itself.
I love it. Artists have, you think back to Good Fridays, artists have made series fun and they've really built anticipation around it. But, quarantine for sure. But I've noticed that, you mentioned Guns Project, which is great. There hasn't been a ton of amazing music coming out. And so to kind of have a big Ab Soul record that's as good as an Ab Soul record as I've heard in, at least 3 years, maybe closer to 5 years, that's exciting and that's fun and that is cool for fans.
Yeah, Solo killed that record. He destroyed it. I thought that was amazing. That made me really excited to hear new stuff from him. Because you're right. The beat was perfect and he went in on it.
The beat changes. And that's the thing is, early in his career, Ab just picked such phenomenal beats. And this one, oh man, I looked up the producer and I was like, oh man, I hope this guy is going to become one of those TDE in-house fixtures.
Oh yeah,
that was good.
Do you remember the name?
It's like a government name too. I'll look it up. Yeah.
Okay. So by the way, anybody watching, you can listen to any of these songs on our Ambrosia for Heads playlist on Spotify. We have a playlist we keep updated, and all those songs except for the Sir one are on it. For me, Soul, hands down was the one that I gravitated toward the most. Mm-hmm. The Reason was clever, and he did some really provocative things lyrically. And Isaiah Rashad, it was cool. It's just cool to hear something from him. He's been so kind of reclusive over the last few years. It's good to hear some product. Now, were you disappointed that Kendrick and J-Rock and Schoolboy Q didn't drop something?
No, I want TDE to really showcase kind of these artists, and for Isaiah and Ab, like you said, they've kind of kept us waiting. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe this goes another week or we get another batch of this at some point. And that's when, TDE, Dreamville, Griselda, these movements are really making being a fan fun. And yeah, TDE's done that historically. Like when they troll a signing, they did that with Isaiah Rashad back in the day, Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. And I really did like that Sir record. And it's good to see TDE working with Boogie, because that was a dope Boogie verse.
Yeah, that's the only one I haven't heard yet. I want to check that out. So I gotta. Do you think Kendrick has got something in the top?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if we'll see it right now. Certainly a single, but I think Kendrick is. I feel like the way I imagine Kendrick, which is different than any other artist, and you've spent time with him. I have not. I feel like he always has an album ready. And that album, sort of like a stand-up comedian's act, it just evolves further as you go. And then at some point, he's like, nah, I got to put this out.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about collectives earlier. I want to know from you, which of these collectives you think is the strongest? And I'm going to try and be methodical about it. Dreamville, Black Hippie, MMG at its prime, Young Money in its prime, Slaughterhouse. I'm gonna stop there.
No Westside Connection, no.
Nah, different era.
And you said I'm kidding. You said Black Hippie in its prime.
Yeah. No.
You said Black
MMG in its prime. Black
MMG.
Black Hippie.
Black Hippie today. Dreamville today.
Well, yeah. Well, their whole, but MMG is changed, shifted. So when they were at full strength.
Man, that full strength MMG, you know, again, like to your thing, like put it in a room. I think, I, I think that that wins. For me, personal taste, I'm going Black Hippie.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Black Hippie too. Although I gotta say, J. Cole has assembled a squad of just killers,
Yeah.
real killers.
Yeah, Earth Gang's been in heavy rotation for me, you know, for several years now. But if for everyone that loved Mirrorland, if you go back and listen to their EPs and work ahead of that, it is just as polished as it ever was with signing signing the Dreamville.
Yeah, yeah. Now, so you talked about Westside Gun, that album, man. I've been like, just it's been on heavy rotation for me the last few days. What are your thoughts about the album?
I like it. I can't yet decide if I like it more than Supreme Blientele, but I definitely think it is at the top of Gun's solo catalog. I really think that he's proving himself to be one of the best ear for beats. And what's dope about Westside Gun doing that is, you know, his network is smaller. Like he's finding the new voices in the underground and at the same time working with Muggs, working with Premier, Alchemist. Um, yeah, I was really impressed. I appreciated it more with each listen.
Yeah, I love it. And you hit on it. I think his beat selection has just gone to a whole different level.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I love 327 with Tyler and Joey Badass. That joint is just so soulful and laid back, and it's a different look for him.
Yeah,
You know, I love 500 Ounces with Freddie
Gibbs
Gibbs
and Rock.
and Rock, and I love that he brought Rock onto it. You know, and
Yeah,
he's very, very vocal about Rock, kind of like being their fly guy. You know, when they were coming into it. Party with Pop Smoke. There's a lot of really, really soulful joints on this that are a different lane than what
yeah,
he's done, but it still feels very consistent with who he is. You know.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, on paper, I didn't expect a Wale West Side Gun collaboration to sound especially pleasing to the ear. I really like that record too, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm impressed. And one thing, I mean, I am astounded. Like MF Doom has this run in, you know, 2002, 3, and 4, where he just put out so much music. And at the time, I remember thinking like, you know, you're flooding the market and taking away the props that you deserve by being so prolific. But what Griselda has accomplished just in the last 2 or 3 years of putting out these things, I mean, Westside Guns released 3 albums, maybe more in the last year. And, you know, at the same time, he's probably made his best project to date.
Which is insane, right? I mean, just
Yeah.
the volume of music that he puts out, and to be able to go to a different level at this stage, and to do it at a time where he's really feeling
Yeah.
like he's on his deathbed too, is insane. You know, I watched that interview, and he talked about how he was really inspired by being in Paris during Fashion Week and being around Virgil Abloh and people like that. He said he hung out with Pop Smoke actually too,
Yeah.
shortly before he passed. And yeah, I mean, the guy he's brilliant. Like, I know when we sat down with him and did that interview, which people can check out too on our channel, it was really cool to see how methodical and strategic he's been
Yeah.
in building this. You know, it's not an accident; it's by design. And I'm just very impressed by what they've done. And they all three. I was listening to it today. Part of I think what makes Griselda work so well is they all three have different frequencies. You know, Gun is the high end, um, Benny's the low end, and like Conway is like mid range. Just
And you mean the
sonically,
vocal
just the
frequencies?
vocal frequency, just sonically, like they just fit together really well. They bounce off each other really well. You know, and um, I'll tell you two things. So one, just talking about the movement, and we talked about this with Gun, is that I was at A3C. It was 2017, and I saw them, and it was like in a bar, and it was maybe like 20 or 30 dudes in there.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like real rough and tumble, and like hardcore Griselda. Like it felt like being in Buffalo or something like that, checking
Yeah.
it out, a local show. a year later, they're performing during the day on the main stage, and it almost seemed like A3C messed up by putting them during the day because it was packed. I've been
Yeah.
to A3C 6, 7 times. I've never seen a day stage packed, and just in a year, you could see how different the momentum was for those cats, right? Like,
Yeah.
so it reminded me of almost like, being around Kendrick, because like you said, I was around Kendrick. Like it felt like, I think I saw Kendrick probably on average like every 2 weeks for like 2 years, like,
Mhm.
between 106 and award shows and stuff like that, just was around him quite a bit. But it was amazing to me to see the transformation for him from like March of 2012 or so until like end of 2012. Like
Yeah. See that
um,
with Griselda.
yeah, I saw that with Griselda, and in terms of frequencies, so I had a conversation once with, it was me, um, a couple coworkers from Stephen Hill, Kelly Griffin from BET, um, and then Kanye and Two Chains.
Hmm.
We're all backstage talking, and we are talking about Meek Mill at the time. And Kanye was saying that he loved Meek. We were all talking about how we like Meek, and like Kanye was saying how hip hop just needs that frequency sometimes, that high pitched voice, right? Because Meek has got that voice, like MC Shy D. Like you can go back and
Yeah.
identify unique, high pitched, Easy E. Like there are a lot of people, and
Sure.
Westside Gunn is filling that niche right now. Is that high frequency voice?
He is, and he's really doing. I mean, he's doing it for all the forefathers in hip hop, like you mentioned, rock, like Planet Asia. There's like West delivery, the beat choice, all of that. Yeah, it's really great to see, and I've never seen a player coach. West, is kind of the main shot caller, as I understand it, of Griselda, but he's also the front artist. He put out others so quickly with him. Usually, you look at Dreamville or you look at TDE, it took a few years before others could start, to get there. And I know Benny, was jammed up for a bit, but even just starting right away with Conway, Griselda has really been a bootstrap movement, which is great to see.
Yeah, yeah, brick by brick.
So you mentioned Kanye. Your man's a billionaire.
Yeah, so it says, like, I read that Forbes article kind of in detail,
Mm-hmm.
and it's debatable. First of all, like, it's crazy to me the lengths to which he has gone to show that he is a billionaire,
Yeah.
by disclosing his financial records to Forbes. Like, that's insane. And them saying that there's only been one person as focused on like them, crediting
Yeah.
his wealth, and that's Donald Trump. It's like,
Yeah, that made me laugh too.
yeah, there's a coincidence for you. But in reading the article, it sounds like he gets $140 million a year from Yeezy, and that's a movement in itself. Just the fact that the guy has been able to build
Yeah.
and rise from the ashes, claiming bankruptcy, like, 5 years ago, although I don't know how many people truly believe he was really bankrupt, but,
Right.
claiming like severe poverty and having a meltdown on Sway and all that other stuff, to netting $140 million a year in royalties just from the shoes. So the math they use is that if you do a multiple, and they said like a conservative multiple might be like 5 times that, a high multiple might be 17 to 20 times. So doing like a 10 times multiple of that annual amount of $140 million would put him at about 1.4 billion, plus his music assets and stuff like that. Then they subtracted like his liabilities and debts, like properties that he owned and stuff like that. So they put him at about 1.3 billion. It doesn't matter really. Like if the
No.
dude is like 500 million, 750,
Yeah.
whatever it is, like he's made a shitload of money, and the fact that he's been able to do that is astounding and a real credit to him. It's also interesting to me though that he's just yet another example of a hip hop artist who has only become insanely wealthy
And something
through
else.
branching out, doing something else, right? The music is always a proxy, whether it be Dre and Headphones, Puff and Ciroc, Jay and, the Live Nation stuff, and and Rock Nation Management and all that other stuff.
Yeah, Latifah, Will Smith,
Yeah,
on and on.
they all parlay it. It's a shame that like the thing that makes them the most relevant can't be the thing that they make the most money from.
Right. But I give them all the more credit in still making music, still putting things out. Like Snoop Dogg doesn't need to put out albums anymore. He does a TV show with Martha Stewart, but he still, feeds the fan base that propelled him to that height.
But that's the thing, though. I think he does have to put out music. I think that Puff does too. I think that they have to stay close to the culture to stay relevant. It's almost like their marketing arm, Like I think if you don't do it, then you lose that relevancy.
But there has to be a point where you don't need it anymore. I mean, in the Latifah and Will Smith case, and obviously Queen Latifah was still making music, but she hasn't made a hip hop album, or she didn't make a hip hop album for close to a decade.
Yeah, but what has Latifah done that you recognize in the last 5 years?
True, but I might not be the most qualified person to answer that question. Like,
you're pretty qualified.
So
pretty qualified.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you.
Puff stays relevant through French Montana and Instagram and social media and stuff like that. He's very, very in the culture that way, and Revolt, to some degree, But Jay, I think that's the only reason Jay still puts out albums.
Just for legacy.
No, not for legacy. To maintain his cultural relevancy, so he can parlay that into other things.
Yeah, but legacy with Jay is a huge factor in there. It has to be, because that's why he never. If he has something that doesn't resonate, he comes right back with something totally different for that reason. And you can say it's marketing. I see it as you always want to be at the top of the current game.
Yeah, I mean, I think his legacy, though, he could walk away now, and it's literally like MJ, like Game 6 Utah, 1998, like it's done,
Those Forbes lists are funny. I did 2006s for Forbes, and Zach O'Malley Greenberg, who's been the editor, I think, just about ever since, and other people had done them before me, but it's a wild process because you kind of, some artists will basically, they won't turn over their tax records like Ye did, but they'll say yes, no, higher, or lower as you're showing them numbers. Like you play like a negotiation ping pong. And it was funny, the year that I did it, some artists wanted nothing to do with it. Like there were artists that were qualified that would tell me, no, the number, so that basically they don't appear in the list. They don't want to be audited. I think that now it's a much different game. And we see like the constant competition between like Puffy and Dre and Jay, and for a while 50, you see it in there, where those guys are always going to be in it. But yeah, Kanye wanted back in that conversation.
So part of that is ego. I mean, that's clear, right? Part of it is competitiveness. So who do you think he's more competitive with? Kim, Kylie, or Jay-Z?
Jay.
Yeah. You think it's important for him to show that he's a billionaire before Jay?
I think that, their relationship is strained. Again, we come into the gossip thing. Like it matters because it changes history. And I know Jay and Kanye are on a different level, but it does matter. And I sometimes imagine that to be on the outs with Jay, the only way you can communicate with him is to try to knock him down. So you look at somebody like Game, who's been dissing Jay-Z the entirety of his career, which I think the origin of that was Jay not willing to give him a verse. And that's been happening because it's the only way you can get Jay's attention. And I think if Kanye shows that Jay isn't the only billionaire of the moment, it's going to advance the narrative. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It does. It does. I mean, it's really interesting that the two of them would ascend to the top, the throne, the throne, right? Like it's the throne, like would ascend first. That's pretty interesting.
I don't know though. I mean, it's almost comical that this comes out now though. Like when I first saw the headline before I ever clicked on the story, I was just like, damn, like really, who gives a fuck? Like right now when everyone's unemployed and everything else, like you're going to come out of the woodwork now to be upset about it. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. Shout out to him for, like you said, though, turning himself out of debt.
Well, here's the other component, though, and I want to know how much you think this is real. The other thing he talks about is the racist issue. Like he's saying that he's not being included because they don't want to give that credit to a black man. And I will say that like it is inspirational. It means something, you know,
Hmm.
to be able to see black billionaires. You know, Oprah. That was really incredible and powerful for people. When Robert F. Smith did that donation to Morehouse, that was powerful for
Yeah,
people. Um, you know, seeing billionaires come out of hip hop culture is powerful, not just for black people, but for hip hop
for sure.
people who are part of the hip hop nation. You know, so I'm not mad at him trying to claim that too, if that is in part his motivation as well.
And for Kanye to flaunt wealth, especially that it's coming from Adidas, is important too, because the history there is Nike gave him a very, you know, here you go contract, whereas Adidas worked with him and put him in an ownership role, which is a very important narrative, you know, across the board, but certainly in Black culture right now. I can say that as an outsider.
Hmm. So now we've talked about Nike, we've talked about MJ, we've been dancing around.
Yeah.
A pretty cool documentary, The Last Dance. Have you checked any of it out yet?
Yeah, I watched the first two episodes. The DVR is set for tonight's next two. So goes without saying, but I grew up in Pittsburgh. I've never been like I never had an NBA team, so I was a Sports Center consumer every day. But I never paid tons of attention to the Bulls, and I love this documentary. Like this might be the best thing I've watched in 2020.
Yeah, so when they were going through their run, um, that was like 2020, like 23 to 29 years ago. Jeez, so
Yeah.
you were you were like 8, 9, 10. You remember it, right? Do you remember that run?
Oh, of course. Yeah, and I remember the sneakers, and I remember seeing the jerseys everywhere. And I watched a lot of those games, but I'm not a fan like you are. You
And
know, I
you weren't
mean,
old enough to know the behind the scenes and stuff. I'd be following like what's going on with Jerry Krause and Jerry Reinsdorf and stuff like that. That wasn't.
like I knew both of those names through Sports Center, but for instance,
Yeah.
I was never aware that Scottie Pippen was so underpaid and had that contract until episode 2. Like for me, I like this as a human interest story as much as, you know, sports nostalgia.
Man, they did Scotty dirty for that dude to make $18 million in 6 years, and you know Mike made 35 million in 1 year. His last one of his last couple of
Yeah.
years, like, and Pippen was number 2 player in the league, probably, or if not number 3 to Hakeem. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, they did him dirty.
And Jerry is saying in the documentary that he encouraged him not to take that deal.
Yeah, no,
I'm
that's
not
like
buying that.
Easy E, like encouraging like Dre not to
Yeah.
like, you know. You know, I think about that too. Like, you know, people like have such short-sightedness. You know, if this dude had just paid Scottie Pippen more, if he had not been egotistical about Phil Jackson, they could have eked out one, maybe 2 more championships. Like, you know, and maybe Jordan stays like, you know, in '93 and they go on a run like the Celtics where they get 10 in
Yeah.
a row or something like that. I mean, they could have been, they're already historic, but they could have just been like, you know, in the record books. And I think
I
about Easy
definitely.
too. You know, if Easy E
Yeah.
had just paid Dre and been a partner to him, think about how different, how much more money he would have made in the long run, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And he still did get his residuals from the Chronic, at least in maybe 2001. But yeah, just to me, those first two episodes, to know that Jerry Krause refused to go beyond one more year with the renegotiation with Phil Jackson is just mind blowing to me. Over ego, like Jay says, well, I lose everything over ego.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and man, yeah, to know what happened to basketball and all of that, it's just it's crazy. But I'm so astounded that there was all of this unseen footage. You know, to see Jordan in the locker room making fun of Jerry Krause, to see all of this, cameras were always running, and that's just it's such a joy to see 20-plus-year-old footage that you never knew existed.
Yeah, I read about that. The way it went down was, you know, a guy from, was it ESPN? Yeah, a guy from ESPN came to the Bulls organization. You know, he had, you know, seen the news. It was probably going to be their last year together, and proposed that they do it. And he got buy-in from management and, you know, Phil Jackson and like other team members. And last was Jordan. And the only way he could get buy-in was to say that Jordan would have final creative control, like approval over whether or not it came out. And so, they did it and gave him unprecedented access, and everyone was candid and the whole nine. And then it sat 10 years, 15 years, and so forth. They would go and talk to Michael every 5 years or so, and he was not down to do it. Yeah. But in, I think it was June of 2016, they approached him one more time, and he was ready to do it. And it coincided with the day that the Cleveland Cavaliers won the championship, and there was chatter of, is LeBron better than Jordan? And also the Golden State Warriors had just been on the cusp of, done the 73-9 season. Yeah. And on the cusp of being called the greatest team ever, how they won. And so there were two things that showed chinks in his his legacy, his immortality as the GOAT. And so I think the stars aligned and his competitive juice clicked in and said, okay, it's time to remind people who we are.
Classic competitor. Yeah. And how about the music too? I'm Bad, LL Cool J. And,
oh man, they're killing it. Yeah.
And I Ain't No Joke. Just awesome. I mean, I love ESPN has been since 30 for 30 started. And I've always loved their documentaries since Outside the Lines and that stuff. It's just so I can't wait till tonight. I wish if they had dropped them all at once, I would not have gone to bed Sunday night.
But in some ways, I'm almost happy because it gives us something to look forward to, right? Shout out to them for dropping it early because it's supposed to happen in June, and they really needed it. But also, it has definitely been a thing that I look forward to every week now. So that's cool.
Well, we will keep talking about that in the coming weeks. Huh?
For sure. So, to close out, man, what's your song of the week?
So with the 25th anniversary of the infamous Mobb Deep put out an expanded edition. They tried this a few years ago and it kind of disappeared from the internet, but they put out a lot of, some of the alternate mixes, Shook Ones Part 1, which I don't think everyone has necessarily heard, but there's a joint on there that didn't make the infamous called Lifestyles of the Infamous. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like it was made between Juvenile Hell and on the earlier side of things. Man, the production, the rhyming, there's several verses from each. It's just, it's everything that goes right with a reason to celebrate the infamous.
Yeah, man, I love that the Temperatures Rising remix on that. We talked about that with the Havoc. I love that joint. For me, it's 327 off Westside Gunn's Pray for Paris. His joint with Joey Badass and Tyler the Creator. That joint is just so rugged to me. It's smooth and soulful, but typical grime in terms of their lyrics, and it's just I love it. It's dope to me.
That's another one that on paper, it sounds questionable, but they definitely delivered, and it is on our playlist.
Yeah, and Billy Esco is on that too. So, that's on the playlist. Check it out. It'll be in the links below. But always a pleasure, man.
Same time next Sunday, man.
Yeah.
Stay healthy, and everyone listening and watching, we're pulling for you too.
And I'm gonna say peace from the West Side.
Word.
Right,
peace from the Slaughterhouse.
Word. Later.